All right, now we're going. So hopefully my audio is all right. Somebody let me know if it's too windy, I'll move. But let's get the show on the road. Thanks everyone for coming to this version or this episode of the CI Chit Chat. Mitchell Hora here with you, and we're talking carbon intensity, which is basically your carbon footprint per bushel or your carbon footprint per unit of outcome. And this is important because a lot of supply chains, their carbon footprint begins on the farm. In particular, when thinking about biofuels, a huge driver of the carbon footprint of a gallon of biofuel is derived from the farm and the farming practices occurring, the impact that farmers have, um, the impact that farmers have on our carbon footprint. And we can impact our footprint by our utilization of fertilizers, cover crops, reducing tillage, utilizing manure, a variety of different things that can impact our footprint. And this is a big topic because of 45Z. If you're new to the show, 45Z has been in law for 3.5 years. It was part of the Inflation Reduction Act and now part of the Big Beautiful Bill. We've been talking about it for 3.5 years, waiting for rules, and those rules are getting extremely close. I won't spend too much time. Okay, good questions coming in. That's great. Um, I don't have a ton of time today. I got to get on the road to an event over in Omaha, but I do have a variety of quick updates, and I'll get to questions and stuff here as well. So, the main couple updates. So, this is a tax credit, right? So, it's under the jurisdiction of the IRS and the Department of Treasury, right? Because it's a tax credit, falls under the Department of Treasury and the IRS. The IRS or Treasury, they wrote their preliminary rule and published it back in February. They opened up a public comment period, which ended in April. And back in February, they announced that they will do a public hearing, and that public hearing is occurring next week. It's public, obviously. Anybody can call into it. It's a teleconference where anybody can go in and listen in to the comments. It was supposed to be a 1 day hearing, scheduled for May 28th, and they had so many people request to speak that now it's turned into a 2.5 day hearing. So it's going to be a long 2.5 days. It's all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, and then all of Friday morning next week. Continuum Ag was selected to be one of the companies or one of the groups to testify for the IRS. And I'm giving my remarks on Thursday morning. Could be kind of later morning, Thursday morning. And we've got 10 minutes. That's it. Each group gets 10 minutes to kind of say your piece. And part of the rulemaking process is that the reviewers have to consider everybody's comments. Obviously, they don't have to act on all of them. That would be impossible. But they've got to take note and consider it. And our points are very basic. Our points are very basic. They are, if we get a updated USDA feedstock calculator, it'll be either, hey, just you can use that if you want, or it needs some tweaks, or we already have a Department of Energy feedstock calculator that's been live and it was just updated in December. But anyway, we will give remarks about the feedstock calculator that should be used. Remember, the IRS already said feedstock is intended to be included in 45Z and CI reductions from feedstock in the rule that is being debated here. That's already in there. Their intent is already in there. And they specifically said there will be a new feedstock calculator, which will be the calculator to quantify the carbon reductions coming from feedstock and from farmers. And that feedstock calculator is called the 45Z CF FDCIC. So we will give them remarks about how to adopt that 45Z CF FDCIC. And then we'll be giving remarks about the rules as to how to integrate that data, in particular, details about audit and verification, details about traceability, and of course, our pitch being use book and claim. So, anyway, the IRS process is moving. The hearing is next week. I'm assuming it's a multi-month process after that for them to ingest all of that feedback, start editing the preliminary rule and converting it over, preparing it to be a final rule. And then that has to go through review with Office of Management and Budget at the White House again, and then be finally pushed live. So anyway, the IRS component here, it's most of the way there, but there is still a process here to go from preliminary rule to final. But remember, tax credits are already being generated based on preliminary guidance that can occur, happens all the time. And so things are very much moving forward. And just everybody still has to be a little cautious, a little conservative here, because things could absolutely still change and will. The key thing that we are continuing to push on is, again, in that IRS rule, they said there's going to be a new feedstock calculator and some updated rules. And the USDA has been kind of pointed to write those rules. And they specifically mentioned the USDA feedstock rule in the IRS's in their IRS's preliminary rule. The USDA created their preliminary rule back in January of 2025. And now we know that they are in the final process of getting to release the final rule. So again, it's kind of like the IRS is one phase behind where the USDA is at in all this. And again, the USDA getting their final rule out for their rules about how to quantify, verify, and track feedstock carbon intensity reductions from the farm to the biofuel producer. On April 2nd, the USDA finished their efforts of drafting the final rule, and they submitted it to the White House and the Office of Management and Budget for final review. So since April 2nd, it's been at the White House in final review. The reviewers have been taking private meetings called EO 12866 meetings. They've had maybe 20 of them or thereabouts, maybe just shy of 20. Continuum was the very first one of these meetings. We had ours 2.5 weeks ago. And there are still a couple meetings on the docket that we are monitoring closely. So when the reviewers are hosting these or having these review meetings, EO 12866 meetings, when the reviewers are having these meetings, it's put on the Federal Register that they are occurring. It's public notice. And we can see who's having the meetings, when they're scheduled for, all that good stuff. And we've been monitoring this very closely. At the beginning of last week, there was all of last week, there was only like 3 meetings scheduled. I believe it was either 2 on Wednesday, 1 on Friday, or like 1 on Monday, 1 on Wednesday, 1 on Friday, something like that. Doesn't matter. But the point being is that there was a meeting last Wednesday, a meeting on Friday. The meeting on Wednesday, actually, the company no-showed, and that was made public. They document that on the Federal Register. So the company no-showed, and then a couple days later, that meeting was rescheduled for this week. So the company no-showed. They were able to get it rescheduled for this week. Also, at the end of last week, one final meeting was put on the calendar for, I believe it's next Tuesday or Wednesday. I believe next Tuesday. So point being is this USDA rule, and we know that there's an updated feedstock calculator in this rule. This critically important updated rule is in the final stages of review right now. They technically have another review meeting scheduled for next week, but we know that they could cancel these meetings at any time, end the review process, and push the rule live. So there's 2 ways to look at this. One, dang, that stinks. There's another review meeting on the docket for next week. Man, I was really hoping that they were going to have this done and live before Memorial Day so that we could have these rules and really have some detail to discuss with the IRS next week. So maybe things are delayed and we won't have that critically important material to discuss with the IRS. And we'll have to talk a little bit higher level. Or now we've got another meeting on the docket to monitor and see maybe they'll cancel it and end the review process early. And we'll be able to monitor the status of this meeting to be able to anticipate with more detail the status of this review process. Because typically these reviews, if you ask, you know, if you ask AI, it says these reviews are 30 to 90 days usually. But what we learned with the 45Z rule from the IRS back earlier this year, it took like 45 days. And it was submitted on this USDA rule was submitted on April 2nd. So um, history would say should be getting very close. And history also tells us that the federal government loves putting rules live right before holiday weekends. So keeping our fingers crossed that we'll see some movement here this week, but hard to tell. So IRS hearing next week, USDA rule getting very close, and that should give tremendous clarity here as to if this program is going to take off or not. Jill, thanks for the question. Are you aware of the letters some ethanol plants are sending to farmers that explain that farmers are going to need to provide maps verifying the practices used to grow their corn? They will not receive any compensation for providing their maps. So, Jill, thanks for the question. I've seen a bunch of different uh, letters and notices and whatnot that ethanol plants have put out. As I think everyone on here is aware, Continuum has an incredibly vast network of tens of thousands of farmers from across the country, many of them already utilizing our software where they have gotten their CI scores for free and where they anticipate undergoing the audits, which we facilitate, and we've passed the audits and we understand how to do it. So we're getting a lot of feedback. So I've seen letters where, yeah, farmers are being asked to start submitting some data, sometimes for some compensation, pretty minimal, sometimes for a promise of, hey, we will give you this percentage of the credit if and when it comes through. I've seen a wide array of different things. But what it boils down to is my biggest worry in all of this is the lack of transparency regarding the value of farmer data. So if it, in the case there, like you mentioned, where ethanol plants are saying farmers, give us your maps, give us your data, and they don't compensate the farmers at all. I mean, that sounds a lot to me like theft. They're taking this farmer data in, not giving them anything to compensate them for it, and then turning around and getting the 45Z credit. Now, there may be some details here that the ethanol plants aren't monetizing the farmer data right now either. So there's probably some nuances and some details to this that I'd be happy to discuss more, or we try to dig a little deeper into what exactly has been put out there from some of these plants. But because I think the key is there may be some data getting shared with the ethanol plants for a future promise of, giving some value, and that could be okay. But for the most part, plants right now and farmers are saying, let's just pump the brakes for a little while longer, make sure that this is actually going to fly. Then we can re-engage with the farmers. And farmers are saying, I've got my data organized in a software like Topsoil. I'm ready to rock and roll, but I am going to make sure that there's going to be some reward at the end of this for me to move forward. And what Continuum is bringing to the table, maybe to our own fault at the end of all of this, is we're going to make sure that farmers understand the value that their data brings to the table. And there's a lot of nuances to it, so it's really complicated because 45Z value is not linear. Every new bushel that's verified and brought to the table may not bring any additional financial value to the ethanol plant. Therefore, farmer expecting something in return, it may not be there. And this is a complicated deal that we can explain in a more thorough video sometime. But at the ethanol plant, their CI score is rounded to the nearest multiple of 5 for easiest math. As they go from a carbon intensity of 50 down to 0, they earn up to about 10 cents for every 5 points that they reduce. So it's not linear. The farmers have to understand that their data value is also not linear, that the ethanol plant has to move various stair steps of reducing their carbon intensity, and that takes volume to get it done. So again, not linear. It's a complicated deal, and I'm not explaining it very well this morning. But the value to the ethanol plants is when farmers can work in volume to move the needle because it's all on a weighted average. But that farmer data, it brings a lot of value. And farmers, if you are giving away your data and not getting anything in return for it, or at least something on paper that says that you'll get some value in the future, if you're giving away all your data, like, shame on you. Farmer value is Farmer data is incredibly valuable. It's valuable to you. And you spent time and money and technology to gather all this data. Like, don't just give it away. Now, should you share stuff? Absolutely. Should you be transparent with the ethanol plant? Of course. And there's a lot of opportunity to collaborate and work together on this. Absolutely. But you just got to make sure that the words on the page match up to a share of value later, if and when value is created. And today, money's not flowing. So okay, Jill saying this is not for 45Z. This is for California low carbon fuels. California's now requiring that ethanol sold to their state has been verified by farmer maps. Almost all the ethanol plants are selling some quote low carbon ethanol to California, usually a portion of the ethanol they produce from corn fiber. Yeah. So yeah, California now, and I think Canada maybe is working towards this, and Europe, they've already been doing some traceability. So the gist of it is you've got to show what do they call it? The source of feedstock or something like that. I'm not saying the word that they use correctly, but you have to show where the feedstock was sourced from. And so, yeah, it's giving a boundary file of here was the farm that this crop came from. What I don't fully know on the California side is how much additional value is being brought in. Therefore, what additional value is that farmer data bringing to the table to potentially get a small cut of? My understanding is the premium in California isn't anything substantial. Obviously, it must be something because people are going out of their way to sell into California. One, it's a huge market, but two, they have their low carbon fuel standard. So there has to be some type of financial value. And I know that it's not an additional value if you provide your boundary file of where you sourced your crop from. It's a no, you have to show that, or else you don't get to sell into California at all and don't get whatever the premium amount is. It's not like 45Z where it's an additional incremental value based on practices or based on data. It's just a proof that your feedstock was sourced where your feedstock was sourced. So I don't know. It's a complicated one. So I think the key on that is if it's just a boundary and the farmer can't sell to the ethanol plant unless they give a boundary, okay, that may be part of it. And hopefully the basis at the ethanol plant justifies that additional work that a farmer has to do to give a boundary. But I think at a minimum, there should be at least some transparency between the farmers and plants to know what are you use my data for? What value is being garnered here? And how is that value being equitably shared amongst everyone? And again, I don't believe that the shareable value is all that big. So probably not while there's a lot of issues. But yeah, your point here. It'll establish a precedent for data sharing in the future. Farmers give their data for free. How will they ask for compensation later? 100%. That is the biggest issue in this. And again, that's where I think it boils back to transparency in the value that's being created. And maybe it's just in the basis where if that ethanol plant is going to remain viable and remain competitive, that they are getting value in from California, and they've got to be competitive with their local bid, and then farmers can be compensated based on a better value for their crop. And in order to get that higher basis value, you've got to share a boundary file with it. Now, again, I think there needs to be transparency in that. I think that needs to be spelled out in legal writing with contracts and like signatures and actual detail. Because you're exactly right. It's a slippery slope for farmers giving away a bunch of the value, not understanding what's in it for the other guys. And that's kind of the entire story of American ag, right? Where the percentage of of the food dollar that the farmer gets is super tiny. Like, so this whole issue that we're unraveling here, it's really a huge piece of just the big ag system here in America, where between the farmer and the end consumer, there's a lot of people getting a slice of the pie, and the farmer piece is very, very minimal, with next to nothing for transparency between point A and point B. So I think this all boils down to farmers, you better be paying attention to where your data is going, to what value is in it for the folks on the other side, whether it be you're just sharing a boundary file and there's some additional value in California. Okay, well, farmer, you're spending time, your data, you're giving away this data. Yeah, you got to be compensated for it somehow. Now, is that compensation for just sharing a boundary file going to be massive? No, like I and I don't think it should be. Um, Farmers should have their boundary files pretty readily available, but there should be some value, or at least some understanding of why are we doing this and what's the value to be shared over the long haul. But especially as 45Z goes forward, because this is U.S. taxpayer dollars being distributed, Continuum has obviously been very aggressive in educating folks about the value that's being created here, about how the tax credit works, about the value of farmer data. So as we start talking 45Z, bigger dollars, bigger data lift, there has to be an equitable share. And the good thing is, I have a relationship with over 100 of the ethanol plants, and I know that there's some ethanol plants that anticipate sharing with the farmer about 50% of the value. You share 50-50. The ethanol plant gets half. They got a bunch of costs to cover with that. And the farmer gets half. And they have a bunch of costs to cover with that. And there you go. Now, it won't be quite that simple, of course. There's a lot of moving parts. But there's a lot of ethanol plants that are like, yeah, let's just split it. And there's some ethanol plants that want to pay as minimal as possible and keep as much of the upside as possible, which I can see that. I mean, that's business, right? Buy low, sell high. I'm all for it. Well, but I just don't think they're going to be super successful because they got to be competitive and farmers talk. And I think the data sharing thing is going to work itself out. And uh, cool. Thanks. Thanks. I will send you an email here. Let me make sure I get that down. So yeah, interesting to see what different plants are rolling out there. Most of them are being quite quiet. We're having a lot of conversations with plants because part of it being, hey, we've got farmer data. It'll already be verified. We want to just be able to make it easy to push that over to the ethanol plants on the farmer's behalf, and whatever software the plants are using, game on. But also, if we have software that's third party audited, we can help collect the data, ease that burden for the plant and for the farmer, and streamline the whole process. And we just become the software that the ethanol plants use, and we're built out and ready to rock for it. But long story short, and all this stuff, farmers, pay attention to where your data is going. Do not get taken advantage of. Understand that a variety of these different programs, some have a lot of upside value, some not so much. 45Z could have tremendous upside value. It's why we've been beating this drum and working like maniacs for the last 3.5 years to make sure that it happens correctly. But we got to stay tuned and see what happens and make sure that we can all stay competitive in this and see what the future holds. So, but anyway, so stay tuned. We'll see if some updates come here this week. Stuff with the IRS next week. And our Topsoil Summit is coming up on June 10th. Thank you, Diana. Perfect timing. Registration is still open for the Topsoil Summit. Jeff Cooper, president of the Renewable Fuel Association, is coming to speak to all of the latest details, plus our auditors. Christensen's a leading CPA firm, Mickelson and Co., a leading tax credit broker. So many key players coming to the Topsoil Summit. You do not want to miss it. This will really be the room where the conversation is being had between farmers and biofuel producers to collaborate and go after these new opportunities together. I'm not seeing this conversation happen at this scale anywhere else, and excited to host the event again this year here in Southeast Iowa. So be sure to get registered for that. I think today is the last day for the room block as well. You got to call over to the hotel and tell them that you're with Continuum Ag and get in on the discount if you need a hotel room. You can. I think there's still some rooms available if you don't get called in here today, but the discount and the room block goes away here today. So anyway, with that being said, we'll continue to monitor closely. You all will know as soon as we know more. And I'll send an email follow up here as well. But I got to get on the road. So thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next time here on the Chit Chat. Bye.